We have Nikhil
And the
Seetharam
Canadian
with us.
Screen Award goes to Nikhil Seetharam for Children Ruin Everything!
We have this.
The sad thing is that this is working on me.
Now we have this. What's burning?
I'm making eggs.
Oh my god!
Okay.
Hi, this is Nikhil Seetharam. Writing for comedy is definitely a little bit more challenging because jokes on screen, you don't want to step on it. Any genre of music can be funny. And on the flip side, if something's not funny, then you got to put in a little bit more effort to sort of make it funnier for the audience.
As an Indian, our music starts from our basics like the Saregama.
Even when we were in India and I was a kid, all the music I heard was only Western music. So there was no traditional path for me. So I sort of skipped those elementary steps.
Was it like difficult to cope up and understand the, like, let's say the terminology they were using at the studio?
I also had a weird confidence that, hey, I'm in this room now and people know what I could do. So why don't I try to let the music speak for itself, and everything else I can figure out.
Hope we had that at that time.
Rap singers and other folks you worked with, something which you like remembered, oh shit, that was so funny.
I mean, I think there are a ton of stories, but I think, like less a funny story than just a motivating story for me. When I first met T-Minus,
Lines, being a South Asian, I understand it's not easy to convince our parents to try something in the creative world. how difficult was it for you?
how much time do you guys have?
If it can replace the music, it can actually replace the writing as well.
I think ultimately we all want to succeed in what we do, and the fear of something or someone taking that away is terrifying. So as long as I think there's a clear distinction between what does AI music sound like and what does human being music sound like, as long as there's a difference there and it doesn't ever get too close together, then I think it's okay. And I do know that there are people who use AI as a tool, especially if you're a musician. Some people will use it to flesh out ideas or to provide guidance. And, if you do that, that's okay, because that's part of your creative process. If you're getting AI to write the music for you and then taking credit, that's not okay.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode on Westside Talkies podcast show. Today I have a very special guest with us, and me and Sai are hosting this show. He is a composer from Canada. He worked with some very big international composers like Drake, Nicki Minaj, and many other folks. He worked on many TV shows and also a couple of movies. We are very glad he's with us here today. We want to talk about his story, how is he navigating through the music industry in the Western world, and we also want to listen some behind the scenes stories from him about like how the industry works here, and also about his recent award which he got for Children Ruin Everything. And congrats so much, Nikhil. Very glad that I felt very happy looking at you walking on the stage and picking up the award. And add on, he was nominated to Grammy for like 7 times and even won one award, which is it's like Oscars for music industry. So congrats on that. Very proud to see you being there, and I'm very happy to be talking to you here on the show today.
Yeah, thank you both for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, happy to be here.
Cool. Yeah. Very, very, very basic question to start with. This is something which we would like to do with every guest because, it's always good for us to, where we come from. So we always love to know your stories. Like, where are you from? How did you happen to be in this Western world in the music industry?
Yeah. So I was born in Mumbai, and moved to Toronto around age 8. And I've been here ever since with my family. And, I think musically, a lot of my influence comes from my dad, and also my older brother as well. So just always listening to their music growing up sort of gave me the idea that I want to sort of create my own music. And I didn't really know the path forward because, especially when you're a kid, you don't really know what's possible. But sometimes you can feel that attachment to a craft or an activity. So that's kind of how I started. So the moment we moved here is when I got my first piano and I just started playing. And that's kind of how things started off for me, was just playing my own stuff on the piano and being creative. Uh, I was in lessons for a couple weeks and it didn't really go well because there's just something about being taught how to play other people's music that just didn't jive well with my sensibility. So thankfully, my parents said, okay, you don't have to do classes, but keep playing. And that's sort of
Mm.
how it started for me. So just being in Toronto and then, just meeting a few people, throughout high school, and then you sort of make connections. And I wanted to score film and TV, but I also at the same time wanted to produce for artists. So there was these two parallel paths. But to me, it felt like it was part of the same journey in a way. So as Drake was sort of exploding in Toronto, I had an opportunity to meet some of his producers like T Minus and Boy Wonder, and that's sort of how I started off in that world where I showcased what I could do for them. And thankfully they were like, okay, why don't you come to the studio and let's work together? And that's sort of how that
Mm.
started. And then in terms of film and TV, my brother, he knew someone whose ex-boyfriend was a film producer, and we sort of made that connection. And then I scored his first feature film, like right around the same time that I sort of broke into the production world. So it happened sort of simultaneously. I was about 19 at the time, like 19 and turning 20.
Okay.
So that's sort of how it happened. They both kind of happened at the same time, and I just sort of dived into both and tried to, do the best I could.
Very
Cool,
nice.
cool,
So it
cool.
looks like you started very young working with all these people, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think 19 was when I sort of was going to the studio every day and, working with people that I couldn't even imagine I was in the same room with, like idols that I grew up, sort of looking towards and never really realizing I could be in the same position as other producers to work with them. So that, yeah, it started around 19 where it's sort of a little bit more professional and a little bit more, every day in the studio working. And then I think my first song came out when I was 20, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Oh,
Wow, that's
nice,
great.
nice, nice,
So,
nice.
also let's talk about your first gig in movies. So, one of your like brother's friends helped you meet a producer, and you started like doing or composing movies or composing for your first show when you were like 20.
My first feature was when I was 20. Yes.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
that sounds fantastic.
Thank you. I mean, it was a very interesting experience because I had no prior experience. I was writing music, I was composing, I was orchestrating, I was doing all of that, but it was very much on a personal level. And I think like in my last year of high school, I composed a piece for the school band,
Mm-hmm.
and that piece sort of stayed in the repertoire of the band at my school. So that was my first instance of writing for other musicians to perform. And then when this film came out, like in my head, I was like, okay, I'm gonna record with an orchestra. It's gonna be amazing. But then the reality of no budget at all, it sort of hits you and you're like, oh, I have to do everything in the box. I have to figure out how to make an orchestra sound real using virtual instruments. And I had stuff at the time, but I sort of had to dive in and figure out how can I make the sound believable. So that sort of started my journey into VSDs and sample libraries, and I wrote the whole score just on my keyboard on my computer. And obviously it was a very learning experience because I didn't know what I was doing. I had never scored to picture before, which itself is a craft and a skill that doesn't necessarily just come to everyone. So you have to kind of figure out the intricacies of how to score to picture using, I use Cubase still, and that's what I started on as well. So kind of navigating the technical aspect was almost harder than the creative side. The creative side actually to me was a little bit easier with the ideas and the composition itself. But yeah, that was a very much a journey that I began that was a little daunting because I didn't know what I was doing at all.
Definitely, we definitely
Cool.
didn't know what we were doing when we were 19.
Yeah,
Yeah, right,
exactly. I was actually, I was still playing at that time.
right.
Okay, so you're typically from India, right? Even if you have a musical background, as an Indian, our music starts from our basics, like the sari gama pa. Did it start the same for you, or like you directly started playing piano, or like just went into music?
So that's a great question. I think because my parents are, even when we were in India and I was a kid, all the music I heard was only Western music. So there
Oh,
was
okay.
no traditional path for me. So when I started playing myself, like just on the piano, I sort of skipped those elementary steps and
Oh,
went
okay.
straight into just ideas that I had, which once again are a little bit more Western focused and a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more, in the sort of Hollywood-esque cinematic realm, as
Yeah.
opposed to, like a traditional Indian composer who would start off um, just with like different music vocabulary. I didn't have that, and I didn't start with that at all. So I
Okay.
sort of had to pick that up along the way instead of starting with it.
I just got that question because like I learned music, like
Mm,
it was not that much, but I just started music and then even my brother, he's a composer for one of my films now. So I have this particular question. When we have a discussion with I'm the writer director for the film and he's a composer. So we'll have a set of things that we do. As he's my brother, I have that intimacy with him,
mm,
like
right,
we understand, he immediately understands me if they explain you a situation. How are
mm,
you like going to uh music it? I mean, how are you going to start it? Like,
right.
yeah.
Well, I think the way I prefer to work with a director or a showrunner is just with simple language. So,
Okay.
I would prefer if there was less sort of musical terminology being thrown out, less of sort of intricate, um, you know, just words that are sort of up for debate. So, if a director says a word to describe music, that
Mm.
person can have a different perspective on what that word means versus how I would approach it. So for me, it's very simple language, and then when I understand the story and when I understand the goal of what I'm supposed to do. So, there are times where the music really has to carry like whatever story we're telling. Sometimes it has to play very much a backseat. And
Mm.
then when I sort of have those essentials, I allow myself a bit of experimenting, so I know that, I'm being brought on maybe because of something specific, or maybe it's
Mm.
because there's some trust and they think that I can figure out a palette for the project. So I'll just start experimenting, just knowing the story, and that's how it starts for me. I find there's a little bit less clarity and success when someone gets a little too specific and too sort of musically flowery in a way. And then I start to overthink, and then I'll start to, do what I think they want versus what feels natural and instinctual for myself. And I find that there are more notes when I do things like that. So for me, it comes from a very simple place, and then I feel it out. And of course, there, still some back and forth, but there just tends to be a better output for me when there's just that very basic, simple conversation. This is what the story
Mm.
is. This is what the scene is. This is what we
Mm.
want to accomplish. And hey, let's try to hit this beat here. Let's maybe hit this over here, but don't sort of go into, hey, use this specific instrument in this octave and then add this filter, like things like that. Because quite often, they're directors and showrunners who are also musicians. And, in those cases, they have very preconceived notions on how to
Yeah.
approach the music. And then it starts to be a little bit of a, okay, how do they feel about that? And that word that they just used, is that the same way I view it? So then it gets a little bit complicated in that way.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Right.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Also, I know I wanted to ask couple more questions about your background, and we got diverted. I'll go back
Sorry.
there. It's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. We'll go back there. So you kind of started working on or composing music when you were 19. So and you were still going to University of Toronto, and also you went to the music school later. So you started
Yeah.
working, and then you started learning like or upgrading yourself going to the music school.
Yes, that's correct. So I was in first year university. I mean, of course, I've been composing and producing music since I was, I think, 13, but
Okay.
professionally, in terms of like actually doing it on a bigger scale, was at 19, where you sort of figure things out. Prior to that, was very much personal with my friends. Um, and so when I got into university is when I sort of broke into the industry at 19. So things were very different. I couldn't just do things on my own pace. When I had time or I would like not go out to events or like parties and stay home and work on music. When it happened officially, so to speak, it sort of changed everything because university is hard enough when you're a student. And then when you
Yeah,
also are doing a full-time gig, whether it's music or anything else, it does take away time, right?
Yeah.
So that first year was, I mean, it was amazing, but I missed a ton of classes. I missed exams. It was just, me flying out to LA, every other week and just, leaving class immediately and going straight to the studio. There was no personal time. There was no, time to really zone in on university. So it was a really wild, and I have no regrets about that. But just thinking back, it's like, yeah, I wasn't a great student for that first year.
yeah,
Yeah.
Cool, cool.
And then,
cool. But
yeah, sorry,
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say then, eventually I'm like, I need to do something in a more formal capacity. So then, I applied for the Royal Conservatory of Toronto just to get a bit more real world experience with another composer, someone who could teach me some intricacies, some terminology, and that really started happening when so in my first year there was a competition at U of T for composers, and you could send your music in, and if it was selected, then the school orchestra would perform it. And thankfully, a piece that I wrote was selected amongst a bunch of amazing composers. And I went to the practice session, and I didn't bring a conductor. I thought I could just do it myself. And that was the moment I realized that I need some formal training in terms of how to do it on a scale with other musicians. It's not just me in the studio anymore because I didn't know how to conduct. And I had the first violinist tell me, that's not how you conduct. You need to raise your hand up, you need to keep it steady. And like those are things you don't want to hear. And granted, I was a student, but so was everyone else. So that's when I sort of started in the Royal Conservatory just to get a bit more formal in terms of how to approach working with musicians and directors. And that's sort of how things started off.
Yeah, this
Cool, cool.
sounds very interesting to me. So whenever you like, let's say you started doing it like yourself when you were 13,
Mm.
and you're just doing it by yourself until you were 19,
Mm.
and you directly walk into a studio and you did not have any formal experience so far.
Right.
Was it I know obviously it's going to be very exciting and very challenging. I understand you being 19, you could probably be like very energetic at the times, like, okay, let's get it done
Yeah.
kind of a
Right.
thing. But how was it like difficult to cope up and understand the, like, let's say the terminology they were using at the studio, or coping up with the professionals who were already doing it from a while?
Yeah, also
Yes.
there will be an anxiety, right? Like, oh my God, this is my like first experience into the set, and people are asking me something to do and some things that I also don't know to do.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I think you probably hit the nail on the head is there was just so much exhilaration and just excitement in general that I didn't think about that, which was great. At the time I didn't. So if someone said something in the studio that I didn't understand, I would look it up or I would ask, and I wasn't
Mm.
afraid to show that, hey, I'm just starting off, I'm just learning. I think when you're especially at that age and you're sort of it's all new, you can go I think one of two ways. Well, one way is to pretend like you know everything and then get things wrong. The other way, one is to maybe ask questions and perhaps look more like a beginner. And I think I wasn't afraid to do that because I knew I was, and I knew I
Nice.
didn't really know anything. And I also had a weird confidence that, hey, I'm in this room now and people know what I could do. So why don't I try to let the music speak for itself, and everything else I can figure out. So it was like a weird sort of like youthful confidence where it's like, hey, well, they heard my stuff and I guess they like my music. So therefore I can afford to look like a beginner because they already know what I could do, which, is obviously like a very sort of cocky, like egotistical thing to think. But I think you need a bit of confidence for sure, especially when you're in rooms with, like as you said, legends or just, people who are much higher up, so to speak, in the industry than you are.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that the more anxiety, sort of self-conscious part happened a little bit later on when I start to realize, hey, I don't actually know as much as I think I do. Hence why, with with the Royal Conservatory of Toronto, things like that. It's like, oh, I need to figure this out now myself instead of just waiting for the day of with the person and then asking them. It's like I want to walk into the room knowing what I'm doing. So that's sort of happened after, but initially it's like I did not think about it at all.
Cool, cool, cool.
We
Hope
understand.
we,
19.
I hope, hope we had that at that time.
Yeah.
Even now, if I have to get into the set, I'm like, already, if I didn't get any chance, but if I had to get into the set, for sure, I'll be like so anxious, so afraid. Oh
Right.
my God, what I'm gonna do now?
It comes
Everything
with
is on.
age. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Oh my
Nice,
God,
Right.
nice.
yeah.
By the way, what language do you speak at home?
English. Even in
Oh,
India, actually. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, even as a kid, my parents just, of course, they're born and raised in India and they you know, are also westernized. So we would only speak English, and it just it was a weird thing because when I came to Canada, there was no ESL, there was none of that. I could speak English better than the kids in my class. So
okay.
it was a very sort of unique experience compared to other immigrants who come to
Interesting.
Canada. Yeah.
yeah. Typically, most of the Indians speak 3 to 4 languages.
Yeah.
I thought you like speak some like some other language, maybe Hindi or some like
No,
South
I'm
Indian
actually
languages.
I'm very jealous of anyone who can speak more than one language, and I'm assuming both of you can.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm
Yeah,
very, very envious of that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you should probably hit learning something.
Yeah, I probably should. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
yeah,
cool. And one more thing is like you ever had a hit or a star working on any of the Bollywood movies? I was trying to search about you before, and I kind of found that you worked on one of the Bollywood movies. Is that true?
That is true. Yes.
Okay.
oh,
That was a very interesting situation. So, on Facebook at the time,
Hmm.
someone like a singer that I knew, a producer, a film producer reached out to her to get to me. And it was a really interesting situation because I'd never imagined working in that space, just being sort of here and trying to assimilate into the Canadian and the US, film industry and music industry. It was very much not on my radar. But it was really great because I got to experiment with instruments that I'd never really used before, and I got to work on 5 songs, and it was just a very interesting, unique experience. I mean, granted, I didn't understand the songs themselves because of the language barrier.
yeah,
But the film producer I worked with, he was very accommodating to that. And yeah, it was like sort of like a one-off experience. And I mean, it's one of those situations where, you could either not do it because you're worried that, hey, I've never done anything like this before, or you can say it's a challenge. So to me, it was a bit of a challenge, um, but a very interesting and fun one for sure.
It shows that it was a Bollywood movie, but the title seems like it is a Tamil movie. Do you remember what language the movie was in?
It was definitely in Tamil, but I believe it was,
okay,
yeah, but I believe it's a remake of a Hindi film.
Oh,
I believe
yeah.
so. I believe so. Yeah.
Cool. So nice. So you
okay,
worked in like Tamil film on a
Yeah.
Tamil
Yeah.
film.
That's
Nice.
right. Yeah.
That is interesting. I see them going out and exploring different options. It makes sense.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
So, one more thing. I know I was about to get to this question, but and you didn't work a lot in like in like the Indian industries or Bollywood or like Telugu or Tamil, but
Mm.
from like just from your knowledge, if you're aware, do you see the way how music is produced or composed, or the instruments used or the tech used in that part of the world and here, is it like a lot different or uh
That's a
kind
good
of?
question.
Hmm.
I think I think it's the same because if you're a composer, producer, and it doesn't matter what genre you're working in, what part of the world. I think for the most part, you're either starting at a computer with a keyboard, or with a guitar, or a trumpet, or if you're a little bit old school, pen and paper. So I think the process is the same. I think the only thing that changes is, how many musicians do you have in the room with you, or what specifically are you working on, and are you doing songs? So I think there's definitely a similarity in what I've seen. It's just a person or people in a studio just trying to make music, and then the output is obviously different depending on where it's going. But in my experience, I just feel like it's the same everywhere you go. And in terms of instruments used, that will vary, of course. Like if you're working on a Hollywood film or if you're working on a pop song, those are obviously quite different things. But it just always starts with that person in a room, creativity, and just trying to make something cool.
Very, very nice.
Um,
You watch like Indian movies now?
Sorry, do I watch Indian movies?
Yeah.
I sometimes do. It's mostly my wife who will want to watch it, and then I'll sort of go along with it. I've seen like a lot of the classics, but in terms of new Indian cinema, we haven't quite got to that yet. But I think a lot of that is because there seems to be a lot of options,
Yeah.
and it's sort of hard to decipher what should we watch. But I think a lot of what I consume would once again just be more sort of American, US, and even UK based stuff, to be honest.
We have two different structures, I mean two different things in the music, right? Like there will be music composition as well as sound design for the film.
Yep. Mhm.
So will is there your part in the sound design as well? Because both should go apart, right? Like when it comes to the edit table,
Mhm.
they both go on top. If
Yes.
yeah, so how does that thing work when you're behind the screen? How does that thing work? Like
Yeah.
do you also involve in the sound design of the film?
So I think for the most part, if you're a modern composer, quite a fair bit of what you're doing when you're composing for the screen is also sound design, but not in the traditional capacity. So if you're writing a piece of music, you are putting sound design elements in it depending on the project and the scale of it as well. So you're not sitting there with a director wearing the sound design hat, but
Mm,
in the process of composing, you were pulling sound design elements that are perhaps atonal, just effects to
mm,
enhance the score. So that by itself would just be considered score. It's just more sort of modern projects are involving that without anyone really talking about it. So a director won't sit there and be like, "Oh, I really like that sound design element that you included." No one's saying that.
okay.
It's just sort of adding to the score itself. And then
Yeah.
the actual sort of sound design experts will come in and do all the things that, we don't even realize are happening. Even a composer
Mm,
won't realize. So
mm,
they do go hand in hand. If it is a case where, it's a score that doesn't involve any of those elements from the composer side, it's always a bit of a battle because when you're in the mix, you know, dialogue is king, and then you have sound effects and music,
yeah.
and there's always that balance of do we favor the music? Do we favor the sound effects? Um, and that's why I like to be in the room at that time too, is like let's find a good balance instead of sort of turning one down and keeping the other one up. But it's always sort of a challenge, I think, for mixers, especially working on films and shows, to balance that sort of sound design, music stuff, because they both live in the sort of auditory space in a way. Like
Yeah.
they occupy a similar space, and quite often they can bump against each other. And there've been a few instances where, I've either had to change the key of a cue that I've written to
Mm.
match the sound design element that happened after I wrote it,
Oh
or
my
I've asked the
God.
or I've person doing all the sound design to, drop it by a few semitones just to match it to my cue because it's not happening at the exact same time. I'm doing it first, they're doing it second, or vice versa. Sometimes when you're in the mix, you're like, wait a minute, those tones are completely off. But if we just get them back together, then they could feel seamless. So they're very important elements. And traditionally, a composer won't be a sound designer exclusively. They won't just sit there and focus on sound design stuff, but they will pull elements into the score if it helps the composition
Okay.
itself.
Like, what would be more challenging for you? Like, in a scene, for example, there should be some silences coming sometimes.
Yep.
Are these silences more challenging or like because
Mm.
some scenes when I was watching Children and everything, there were some scenes where the silence like just come like that,
Right.
and the scene requires that, of course. But
Hmm.
there would be some and there will be a lot of music coming before. There will be a lot of music and sound design mixed sound thing, and then automatically the silence comes. How does
Yeah.
this thing happens with you?
Yeah. I think a lot of the silence comes from the showrunner, Kurt Smeaton, where he has a very uh, sort of bird's eye view on the project and on the episode itself. And he knows how to tell the story. And once again, sometimes it's sort of trying things out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. But during spotting, we'll decide, hey, it could be, more emotional, it could be funnier, whatever it is, if we drop out everything here. So we'll have that discussion. And there are times where he'll say, hey, why don't we try to have a cue here? But then when we're in the mix, maybe we'll pull it out if it serves the story better. And
Mm,
we have a great relationship where I don't mind doing things like that because my whole goal is to tell the story in the best way possible, and it's always better to have something and then pull it out versus getting to the mix stage and then thinking, hey, I think we need something here, and then suddenly I have to write a cue sitting there with my stuff. It's not the optimal thing to do. So those silences are very carefully selected. And, sometimes an executive in the room will say, hey, I wonder if we can drop everything out here. And then
mm.
you try it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then you put it back in. But it's always about having enough music and enough sound design to then pull away instead of the other way around. And that typically happens first at spotting, and then secondly at the mix stage where you're listening to everything mixed in. And then you can make those decisions, but still have a backup just in case you change your mind.
So for
Yeah.
series, especially like every episode you will be composing.
That's right. So
Oh my
it
God.
yeah, so I mean, on a schedule for a TV series, sometimes you get a week to score a full
Okay.
episode. Sometimes you get 3 days, sometimes two
Okay.
days. And I think the benefit of a series like Children and Everything, we ran for 4 seasons. So
Yeah.
I'm pulling themes, I'm pulling motifs, I'm pulling ideas from previous
Yeah.
episodes, especially if it's serving the story. So at least I'm not starting from scratch every time. I have a sound palette that I created for the show. So even though I'm sort of writing fresh for the most part, I'm still pulling ideas and taking this element of this cue that worked in season two for this character and then reworking it. So I am writing for every episode, but as you get later on into the seasons, oh, I think I lost my camera. There seems to be it seems to be a little bit easier in terms of the process because you have a baseline to start with. Uh,
Okay. So it's easier for films more than series. That means like,
well, I think for film, especially if you're doing a film that's not based on a sequel or anything, then it's very much a blank slate. Just like the starting of the first episode of a series, it's very much blank slate, and you're trying to figure
yeah.
things. And I think in a
Yeah.
film, there's more time typically. You
Mm.
can have 4 weeks, you can have a couple months, you can have 6 months. I have done a feature in 2 weeks, which was
Oh.
very
Oh,
very tight. But in those instances, there's no opportunity to record any live musicians or anything like that. But I think in a film, especially, we're speaking of silences. I think it's really important to identify those silences earlier on in a film,
Mm. Mm.
especially if you're doing recording as well. Oh, I think silences can tell a story sometimes better than music can.
Yes. Yes. That's
So I think
true.
it's important to know that no matter what medium you're working in.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Mm.
Cool.
so one maybe like a funny thing to ask, but you've been working with so many people all your life. Is there like any story which you take it with you or like remember and laugh about it like by yourself? Maybe with like T Minus or Drake or like any of the like rap singers and other
Yeah.
folks you worked with. Something which you like remembered. Oh shit, that was so
Yeah.
funny.
I mean, I think there are a ton of stories. But I think, like less a funny story than just a motivating story for me. So when I first met T minus, you know, I was in first year university, and then I wasn't driving downtown at the time because I was coming from Ajax. So I was taking the bus, I was taking the train. I remember the day after I met him and I went to the studio, he sent me a text on my old BlackBerry. So this is obviously a long time ago.
Nice.
Um, yeah. And it was just the nicest text message because it was simple, but essentially what he was saying was, listen, there's something special here and we're gonna take over. And to me as a kid at that time, it was super inspirational, but I will always carry that moment with me because he said we're gonna do a lot of damage in the industry, like in a positive way.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, great. Like I'm all for it. And it's so nice to hear that from someone I look up to. And then, he was telling me, he's like, listen, in 6 months, you're gonna have a number one song. Just come work here every day. And almost 6 months to that date, I had a number one song. So I
Oh,
will always remember that as sort of the inception of my sort of production career. And at the same time, working on the feature film, I was sitting in my parents' basement in my sort of studio, so to speak. It wasn't really a studio, it was just, a computer and a keyboard. And the director and the film producer came over. And this was like I think a week after this thing with T minus. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I remember just playing on the piano while the film was playing on my computer and them sort of having this reaction that I will always carry like every project that I do is based on that reaction, which was they didn't know what they wanted. I didn't know what I was doing, but somehow I found it in the room while playing. And I sort of I nailed what the story was about right there just by playing, and they couldn't understand it or comprehend how that was possible. And it was just the most exciting sort of inception for my film and TV career to have that. So I know those aren't funny stories per se, but those are like the ones that I really carry with myself. And obviously, throughout the years, just meeting people and, being in their world, especially when they're an artist or like a big time director or something, it's always funny to see how people change and how they treat these celebrities like royalty and stuff. It's always entertaining to just witness that stuff. But I tend not to think about that too much and more on the sort of creative inspirations.
very nice.
True.
Good, good, good
Nice.
one. Also, music industry as such is so vast, and
Mhm.
you could be anything you want in there. Like you could be a singer, you could be a lyricist, composer, s- uh, like rapper. When you started, like, did you have any specific thing? Like, okay, I wanted to be this because I see you were like doing multiple things, right? Did
Yeah,
you wanted like something specific, or it just went on evolving with age?
I think, somehow I was very specific, especially during high school. I just remember thinking I want to compose for film and I want to produce for artists. It was just the two things I wanted to do. And, if we go even further back when I was a kid, like 6, 7 years old, like, oh, I want to be an actor. Oh, I want to be a singer. But that was just based on nothing at all, right? That wasn't based on any real aspiration. But when I sort of started thinking of what I wanted to do and where I was drawn, it was always those two things. And of course, as you evolve as a person and as a musician or whatever it is that you do, you find other things, or you can sort of hone in on the things that you really love to do. So at first, when I started off, I'm like, I only want to be an orchestral composer. That's to me what a composer is, someone who writes for orchestra. And that was a very young way of thinking. And then sort of as I was in the industry and growing up, I realized that there are different facets to composition. And, sometimes you don't have a budget to hire an orchestra, so you got to figure it out in the studio itself. Sometimes the score actually doesn't call for orchestral instruments. So what am I supposed to do then? So you have to sort of understand how all instruments work, not just orchestra. And then with production, I thought as a kid, I was like, oh, if you're an artist, you make the whole song yourself. Like you write it, you perform it, you made the instrumental, and that was like once again a 6-year-old sort of like that was the mentality at the time. And then as you grow up, you're like, wait a minute, they're songwriters, they're producers, they're co-writers, they're executives behind this one song who pull it all together. And it sort of opens your eyes to, wow, there's a whole industry that revolves around making music, and it's not just one person doing everything. So I think the idea of collaboration also something that was a huge eye opener for me growing up.
Very nice. So you were a little clear with what you wanted to do. I think we
Very
are
clear.
still not
Yeah.
very clear with what we want. So
Which is okay, honestly. I think it's okay as long as eventually, you figure out what it is that you really want. And even if you don't, it's like it just depends on your path and your journey. And not everyone's the same, obviously. But
Yeah.
I do have to say though, if you feel that pull towards a certain craft or industry, I think you owe it to yourself to see it through, instead of being on the sidelines and waiting maybe for things to happen and stuff. It's
Right
always good
chance.
to
Yeah,
dive
yeah.
in. Yeah, if you feel the pull, especially.
There is never a right chance.
There's never a right chance. And the industry
Yeah.
will continue on with it or without you. So it's always good to sort of jump in when you can instead of waiting for it to happen for you.
we
True.
made that
True,
that
true,
makes
true.
sense. Also, you have to travel a lot, jumping in between Toronto, LA, and like other different locations where you shoot or record. Yeah.
Well, yes, I mean, I think for film and TV, I've been on set quite a few times, but there's less of a reason for a composer to go on set unless you have a great relationship with the director and you've started from the script stage. If you've sort of started thinking of ideas, and I love to go on set personally because I get to see how they're telling the story visually. And even though things, I haven't seen it all cut together and edited together, there's still a visual experience about the colors that are being used, just about the interactions, and you get a certain vibe of what's going on. But if things are sort of being filmed everywhere, sometimes it's not possible to just hop on a flight and go. So in those cases, I'll sort of stay in my studio and wait until I get sort of that first rough cut. For artists, it's a little bit more of traveling for sure. I think post COVID, things seem to be decentralized a little bit in the music industry and also the film industry, where there's less of a need to travel. But with that being said, for the first like 10 years of my career, I was in LA all the time. It was very much like a constant going out there, coming back, going out there, coming back. I've been to the UK a few times. Obviously I've been to New York many times as well. So there was a period of time where I was traveling so much that I was spending just more time in LA and once again missing stuff here, right? Like the whole stuff with school, and then you tend to like stay away from everyone that here because you're over there. So I would say now there's a bit more of a balance where I haven't traveled as much as I used to. I'm a little bit more stationary now. Um, and I don't mind it, to be honest. I do like to travel, but I'm okay being a little stationary.
You
Um,
never considered moving out.
all the time, all the time. I mean, I think, my wife and I have discussed it so many times and we've been so close to doing it. And then there's just something that always pulls us back, whether it's, family commitments or whether it's just feeling like, Toronto is our home and, to make that switch. It never felt fully right to make the switch, but I was very close many times, even like finding a place and, almost signing the papers and things like that. It's been an ongoing discussion. But I think, if we can make it work from here, great. And then I'd love to keep traveling there. And there's also some virtue in, if you're trying to set up meetings in LA and someone knows that you live there, it's a little bit different than someone knowing that you're coming in from a different city or a different country. There's a little bit more urgency, and a little bit more of a will to get it done sooner, that the meeting, so to speak,
Yeah.
instead of you living there, then it's like, oh, we can just do this anytime. So I do kind of like a bit of that urgency, like, hey, I'm here for this day to this day. Let's plan something. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, cool. Also, I want to ask something about the industry as such, in general.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. We haven't worked in Hollywood or for that matter, not even in like Indian film industries, but it is because of the kind of friends we have in the Indian film industry. We know how difficult it is to navigate and you know make something out of it because of the like extreme competition and like tons of people
Mhm.
trying to make it big there. And Hollywood obviously being or like the film industry here being a lot bigger than Bollywood in terms of size, in terms of the number of people worked in here or the number of movies it produces. Being a South Asian, was it difficult for you to, make friends or find work or prove that you could make a difference?
That's a great question. I think I never fully thought that it would be a hindrance. And I just always believe that if the music sounds right, then maybe it could genuinely just speak for itself and all the other stuff. Um, of course, it matters, but I think I didn't put any energy towards thinking, oh, as a South Asian, will it be hard for me to do this? It was more, at least for me personally, it was more just, as a person who wants to do music, I already know that's a hard thing. It was less from the South Asian angle. And I wonder if that confidence or being naive maybe sort of served me a little bit better in those early days because I didn't have that chip on my shoulder in a way. I think I've also just been very blessed to work with people who don't see that as a hindrance at all, or even as a hurdle to overcome. And that's obviously credit to the people that I've worked with over the years. But it always felt that it was just hard for me as a person to make it into the industry, not me as a South Asian. And, with that being said, I know it is a very real experience for a lot of South Asians and people from all over the world to sort of break into a market that maybe naturally has not accepted uh, your culture, so to speak. But once again, I think it comes down to the craft itself because if you're trying to break into an industry and your musical language allows you to tell music in that industry's language, then it doesn't really matter where you're from as much as people's perception of you. However, musically, it could make you incredible because if you have this background that you apply to your music and you sort of do it in your own voice, then it could just enhance it and be amazing and very unique that other people don't have. But all that to say, I never really felt, thankfully, I never felt that hurdle to overcome. It's only as I get older do I realize, how fortunate I've been to not encounter that, at least in my professional career and also my personal career as well.
To hear that. I also like the idea of you saying that it might come from my confidence. So yeah, you need to push it to get it.
Yeah.
Same on
You
same
kind of gave
lines.
us you kind of gave us some confidence now,
Nice.
actually.
I'm so
Yeah,
glad. That's great.
yeah. Also, I
Yeah.
think Sai wants to because now he's in India. He wants to like try making it in India. I do not have any plans going back, so I want to try making something here.
Okay.
So we'll see how it
Nice.
goes.
If
But
if he actually makes it there, I'll travel back.
Ah, nice. Yes. Okay. There you go. But I mean, yeah, but once again, I think the industries are obviously different in how they're run, but everyone ultimately is trying to do the same thing, right? Which is create art. So I think maybe the way that you get there could be a little different depending on Seattle or India, but ultimately you're both trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, man,
Yeah,
that's true.
exactly. Also, one more question on the same lines. Being a South Asian, I understand it's not easy to convince our parents to try something in the creative world. How difficult was it for you?
How much
I
time do you
don't
guys
think
have?
it's
No, I'm kidding. No, no, it's I'm actually very grateful that my parents are so level-headed and supportive because initially, granted, my dad was just like, absolutely not. How dare you even say you want to be a musician? Like that's not even a thing that's accessible to where we come from. Like that absolutely not. Like you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be an engineer. He didn't say those specific things, but like my older brother's an engineer and he's fantastic at it and he's brilliant. So I'm looking at him doing that, and my twin brother wants to be a writer at the time as well. So we're like, okay, we both want to do creative things. And my dad was just not having it. My mom was just always supportive to the point where she's like, just be happy and make sure you can take care of yourself. So I did tell my dad, I'm like, listen, I'm gonna go for this. And he's like, this is like a one in a million thing. I don't accept this. So still, at the time, obviously I was like, no, I have to prove him wrong. But he's still a great dad. So and I knew he was coming from a good place because he needs me to survive, right? He needs me to take care of myself. So I wasn't like resentful, but it was more just like challenge accepted. And I don't know how, but when I got my first paycheck from music, I went straight to him and I showed it to him. And that's when he was like, okay, you can do it. That's fine. Because he saw the visual proof that it does provide an outlet for me to sort of live and then also be happy. And that's all he needed to see is that I could take care of myself. And then when he saw that, he's like, okay, this is obviously a real thing. But yeah, that sort of initial, I mean, everyone laughs about it with, South Asian parents having those, three careers that you're supposed to do. And I'm sure both of you can
Yeah.
relate.
No,
Yeah.
I'm actually in your shoes right now.
Okay.
I'm actually in your shoes right now. That's what is happening in my home right now. Like
Yeah, I'm
say,
not surprised.
I'm back in India for like 3 months now,
Hmm.
and it's the same thing happening every day.
Yeah. But honestly, once again, it comes from a loving place. Like your parents
Yeah, yeah, that's
aren't,
true.
they aren't trying to make you miserable. They're just like, can you
They're
survive
just
on it?
worried. Yeah, they're just
That's it.
worried.
That's it. And
Yeah.
if you can show that you can do it, then I think for the most part, parents will be like, all right, cool, you're fine. But there's always gonna be a bit of worry because, once again, in a creative field, you never know what's next and stuff. So, like my parents have been so supportive, but every now and then I've noticed that they will be like, oh, what do you have coming up? Because I think that fear never fully goes away of like, are you gonna be okay? And it's just like, you want to make them feel better, but at the same time, like you're trying to figure out what's next for you as well. And, I think it doesn't matter how much success you've had or anything. As I said, the industry moves on with it without you. So at least for me, my parents are supportive, but always just a little bit like, are you
Scared.
going to play? Like, not even scared. It's more just like, are you going to continue this? Like, are you going to do something else? Like,
Mm.
are you gonna move to LA? Like, is that the best decision? Or like, how are you navigating your work? Because I think, when you're in a more traditional job and career, that's very much like you're hired, you have like, either it's a contract or you have a job
Full
for,
time. Yeah.
years, a full-time gig, right? I think in what we do, it's very much like you're hired for a project and then you have to sort of find the next project. So
Yes.
my parents are, they're super excited for me and all that stuff. But every now and then, like, oh, so what's next? And I'm like, oh, that parent worry will never fully go away,
Yeah, that's true.
which is nice. Yeah.
How is the support from your wife? I know obviously you would be very busy with composing music, sometimes go out like for weeks. How's the house? How are
Yeah.
you navigating that?
Well, so my wife is, I'm just so grateful because she is extremely supportive. She's also my number one fan. And then all of that to say she's also my wife. So she's not just gonna be like, oh yeah, you can be out of the house all the time. We can never see each other. Like that's also not real. Um, but I think we've been through enough and we've also been together for a long time before we were married to the point where she saw me break into the industry. She sort of saw what came with that, all the traveling, all the work, the extremely late night sessions. And it wasn't always a smooth road, obviously, but she learned from those days, like, okay, this is what's going to happen when he's busy. This is what I could stand for. This is what I cannot stand for. So you can't just go to LA for 3 months and then we can't see each other at all. Like that's not realistic. So we have to do back and forth, or you have to stay here a little bit longer. Things like that. We had to figure out. But overall, I mean, like, none of this would be possible if I didn't have her support because she gives me structure. So she'll say, okay, if you're gonna go into a session, like maybe don't come home at 7 in the morning. Maybe go a little bit earlier and then come home at 3 in the morning, like things like that. I'm like, oh, you're right, because tomorrow we have that thing in the afternoon, and I don't want to not sleep for that. So it just makes me then a better human being because I'm like, okay, now I can get a little bit more rest, and now I can focus on non-music things. Um, you know, all that to say, she's been
Schedules
great.
you perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And but once again, it's not just this thing that happens instantly. You have to work it out and go through the situation to figure out what works, what doesn't. And to her credit, she has figured it out with me. It's very easy for someone to say, I don't stand for this. I can't do this. Because when you're with a musician or a director or a writer, so much of it is in flux that once again, like just like your parents, it's hard to like point to, a specific schedule that you're working on or hours that you're working on or job that you're working on. So it takes a bit of trust and support. And thankfully, very, very thankfully, I have that with my wife. I'm just gonna knock on wood,
Nice.
because we'll see.
Nice.
Hopefully she doesn't change her mind. But yeah,
Yeah, you can cut this portion and send it to her from this
yeah. Oh
podcast.
my God.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You can do that. Uh, well, I know there's a couple of one more thing I wanted to ask. I know you worked on some comedy shows, some rom-coms, and I think you're working on Motherboat now, which is like a sci-fi.
Hmm.
Is there any specific genre you wanted to try, like maybe horror or like anything you wanted to like experiment, try something which you didn't do so far?
He actually tried horror, like in Children and everything.
I
One
did
of
do
the
horror and
episodes. Yeah,
children.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, excellent.
That was pretty scary.
Right. Okay, I'm glad.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's funny because there is a horror film that I did last year. It has not been released, and I
Okay.
think it's taking a little bit longer to sort of go through distribution. But that was sort of the first experience I had doing horror, and a very unique one because you know you're sort of throwing your traditional compositional techniques out the window, and you're going to a more sound design space at times.
Hmm.
So speaking of sound design, that was a film where you could watch it and you can hear it, and you're not sure if that's sound design or score. So that was a great experience. I mean, I think genre wise, I'm very thankful to have done all the genres that I have. I want to do more of them. I want to do more drama, more sci-fi, more comedy. Um, you know, there's nothing that I've sort of said I don't want to do. I don't think anyone has the luxury really of saying, "Oh, I don't want to do that genre." It's like it's a creative challenge, especially if it's a genre you've never done before, like horror. That was a creative challenge, and even um, comedy to a certain extent because I never thought of myself as someone who could do a comedic score. But then, sort of as I started Children and Everything, and I realized I could do it in my own voice, and I can make it dramatic, I can make it emotional, and I can hit the funny beats. I could also be very subtle and not be on the nose, and all these things. Like it just opened up a whole new world for me in terms of what is comedy music. And if you watch Children and Everything, there are so many things that happen in that series musically
Yes,
that it's
yes,
hard to be like, oh, that's a comedic beat or that's a comedic cue or a comedic composition. It's like so much of it is the storytelling that I believe that any genre of music can be used in comedy. It just depends on the
yes.
placement and how you sort of contour it to the scene. And anything could be funny, really, if done correctly. So yeah, I think I'm just open to anything and everything.
I had a question in that particular line. Like, did you have any idea of composing a music where this actually doesn't sync to the situation,
Yeah.
but but if you give that particular music, it will be heard as a new one. Like it's like the scene actually excels, and also that's a new experiment.
Yes.
Did you get that chance anytime?
I did absolutely. So, there are moments where you have to be quite specific about, certain story beats that you're hitting musically. And there's sometimes where you like there were a few instances where I played off of it and I did something that didn't specifically and traditionally line up to add to the comedy or to add to the momentum or, whatever it was. And once again, Kurt Smeaton being as great as he is just open to things like that. And sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it does. But just like throughout the series, I was just able to experiment nonstop and just have fun. And for the most part, he was on board with everything and, excited to try it. There's just only maybe one or two moments where he's like, "Hey, can we pull back on that?" Or, "Hey, like let's change this a little bit." And he'll give me reasons as well. But all of that is part of the collaboration. I think you don't get to experiment like that without having the relationship with the director
Mm.
or showrunner, because quite often they'll turn around and be like, "What are you doing? This is not what we asked for."
Yeah,
So it has to start from a relationship for sure.
yeah, that's true. That's
Very
true.
nice. We want to hear a little more about Madabot. I know we're like coming
Mhm.
close to the end to the podcast. This is your latest work coming out now, right?
It's the most recent thing that's being released. Yeah. Murderbot's been great. So I'm on a team of composers who are doing that show with Amanda Jones, who's a composer. And, that series has been incredible because my first TV series ever was a sci-fi series called Utopia
Mm.
Falls.
Yeah, Utopia
Yeah, yeah.
Falls.
And then I hadn't done sci-fi since then, pretty much. Like that was I'd done sci-fi scores, but not on anything that was released, either film or TV. So I started off with a sci-fi show, and then now like Murderbot is the next iteration of my sci-fi sensibilities. And of course, it's obviously different from the first series that I did. However, I was able to pull from whatever. Um, I don't know, just like instincts I have for that. This one is on a bigger scale, and there was several sessions of recording orchestra, and even though I had done that for my first series as well, it was just nice to see the progression in my own sort of abilities at composing for sci-fi. And very, very happy with the score. I mean, it's bombastic, it's epic, it's creepy, it's atonal, and then it's emotional. So it's all over the place. It's also a funny show, which you don't often get with sci-fi. So it's
Mm.
obviously very dramatic, but it's also a comedy. So once again, no comedic traditional scoring in Murderbot. Like there was nothing that was
Okay.
this needs to be a comedy cue because this is an epic sci-fi show, but there's comedy in the storytelling, but musically there's none of that sort of traditional comedy stuff. It's purely epic, purely sort of sci-fi-esque, and then like very like rhythmic and things like that, but nothing that would signify that this is sci-fi. Yet when it all comes together, the jokes are landing, things are still funny, but the music is not telling you that this is funny. It's just working
Mm.
with the picture in a certain way to elevate the inherent story and not, a few dialogue lines. So yeah, it's been a great process. And it seems like everyone's watching it right now, which is great. That's always nice when, people enjoy your work.
Recognize. Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, it's great.
For folks watching this episode, please go take a look at Madabot. It's on Apple TV.
Yeah.
Cool. I know we're coming very close to the end of this podcast. I just want to ask one very funny thing in the end. All these years you've been composing, recording, and like doing a bunch of stuff. Did you ever wanted to try singing?
Ooh, ooh.
I thought of asking you that. Did you sing
I
anytime you were there?
So not many people know this, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this here, but when I was starting off, I must have been like 16, 17, working with this artist. So like the first few years of me producing, no singing at all. So from like 12, 13 onwards, no singing. 16 hits, I meet this guy who goes to the same school as me, and he's a rapper. And he comes to my studio at my parents' house, and we're recording. I'm literally holding up a mic in front of his face. He's rapping over an instrumental that I made. And then he said, "I've written a hook for this song that we're doing, but I want you to sing it." And prior
Oh,
to that, there was no conversation of me being a singer. We had just met like 2 weeks ago. He didn't know anything about me. He didn't know if I could sing. And I thought it was insane that he thought that. And I asked him, I'm like, how do you know I sing? He's like, I know you don't sing, but just from hearing your music, I think you can carry a pitch or a tone. I'm like, that's a wild thing to assume because not every person who makes music can sing or even hold a tone. But
Yeah.
sure. So, obviously I took a gamble, I did it. I sang on, I think, 4 songs of ours that no one, other than my friends and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, no one has heard those songs. But I'm singing, I'm crooning on it, and it's obviously auto-tuned. It's obviously mixed in a way that is a little bit less present because I just didn't think I could sing. But there are 4 songs that I sang on that hopefully no one will ever hear.
Oh
Uh,
God. Oh
but but all that to
God.
say, now, I mean, listen, man, I've been so fortunate to meet incredible singers, whether they're artists or just songwriters, whatever it is. They're all so talented at singing that it just puts into perspective that, like, there's certain things I could do and certain things I cannot do and certain things that I'd like to do. But knowing how good people are in that space of singing is like, let me just step away. I'm not even gonna try to compete with you. Yeah, no, no, thank you.
Very nice. Also, I was just trying to, you do YouTube search with your name, and I found a couple of, compositions. I don't know if they're actually yours because they're not from any official sources, but
Mhm.
they're one of those musics which everybody uses as, copyright-free music for short films.
Oh, really? I'm curious to see what that is actually.
I'll drop you the link, but I don't know. It
Please
shows
do.
your name,
Okay,
but
yeah, I'm
it's
wondering.
one of the, you Google or you YouTube search, cinematic music, copyright free music for short films. You'll get this music out.
What? Well, I've never actually signed off on that, but so I'm curious. However, there's something nice about if it is a piece of mine, just people wanting to use it. I think just it's humbling in itself, but I'm definitely gonna look into that.
I'll drop you those links. I think
Thank
Sai
you,
would
thank
have
you.
definitely saw it himself. Like, we
Yeah,
don't.
because I always do that.
Nice. I wonder if it's mine though.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Yeah.
In that lines, I have a question. Like nowadays, I just started using AI for music because I don't have
Mm,
that much budget for for music in my movies. So I definitely use AI for that. Like, what's your perspective on AI? Like, because of course it's giving a wonderful music. Like, for what the instance I actually got a very good music
okay.
for my upcoming independent film that I'm gonna release soon. So, what's your perspective on that? Yeah,
Hmm. Well, I'm curious. Did you input something and then you got music
yeah, I
back?
did. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I texted something like
Mhm.
it's the software also that I mean the website that I used is suno.ai.
Mhm.
So we have to give some inputs that I'm going to describe the scene like
Right.
this particular, like for example, the girl is walking on the street and she's like wondering what's happening over there and she doesn't know, and I need a like tension music with like kind of a little bit of violence in it. Like I know like what kind of music I needed there, so I
Mhm.
just give that input the same way that if I have to explain you, I did the same thing to that, and it's not the in the first iteration I got it, but kind of like 12 to 15 iterations when I did it, I
Mhm.
got the perfect tune that I needed. So what do you think on that? Like, is it gonna be dangerous
Mhm.
to us? Because I'm kind of scared at that point of time where if it can replace the music, it can actually replace the writing as well. So yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's a little double-edged for me. So on the technological side, it's incredible that we're even living in this age where this is possible. So very, very impressive on that scale. But on the creative side, it's concerning to the degree where, quite often people who are not musicians can be discerning with music and sometimes they can't. It depends on who it
Mm,
is. And
mm,
for the folks that are not discerning, are they going to listen to that and think that it's coming from a human?
mm.
And if they do, and if they're in charge of making decisions, whether it's in film, or the music industry, whatever it is, just the craft of filmmaking in general, then it runs a risk of replacing real people. Then, if someone is more discerning and can tell the difference, then I feel a little bit better about that because it's not to say that AI music is not going to be great or whatever it is.
Mm.
I just like the idea that selfishly, there's something I can do to provide value so that people can hire me
Yeah.
instead of replace me because I think ultimately we all want to succeed in what we do, and the fear of uh, something or someone taking that away is terrifying. So, as
Yeah.
long as I think there's a clear distinction between what does AI music sound like and what does human being music sound like, as long as
Mm.
there's a difference there and it doesn't ever get too close together, then I think it's okay. And I do know that there are people who use AI as a tool, especially if you're a musician. Some people will use it to flesh out ideas or to
Mm.
provide guidance. And if you do that, that's okay because that's part of your creative process.
Mm.
If you're getting AI to write the music for you and then taking credit, that's not okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true.
but if you're working as like an indie filmmaker, for example, and you don't have the budget to hire a composer, then do I think that this is not a great tool? No, I think it's a great tool if you need
Yeah.
to get something. But ultimately, it shouldn't be that that's the only way that you approach it and you sort of remove human beings from the situation entirely. Um, but I think it's still up in the air, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's not
I don't
so
really know.
cinematic, I would
Mm.
say it's not so cinematic, but with the zero budget I had,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
it's kind of, instead of searching in the Google the same music I mean the YouTube, the same music that I always use,
Hmm.
cinematic musics for this, like it's actually giving me a kind of situational music. So I felt it was fine with it, like it might not be as humanized as it, but
Right.
it's fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and I
what
think
I felt. Yeah.
it's interesting because then I think we may get to a point where composers and musicians are once again working in hand with AI. And if you have prompts and then a composer can come in and shape it a certain way. I mean, that stuff to me it's a little unnerving to think about, but I think change in general is
Mm,
unnerving.
mm,
And as long as, we're not being replaced, and I can still write and other people can still write, then it's
mm,
okay. I just don't know. I mean, because like going back to what I said, way back at the beginning, when you realize you have no budget for your first project and then you have to make it sound realistic, especially
mm,
if it's orchestral, what do you
mm,
do? So if this was back in the day, it just wouldn't be possible to have an orchestra coming out of your speakers if you didn't have the budget to hire an orchestra. But
mm,
because the technology, there are sample libraries and VSTs that can emulate that sound as long as you're writing it, you're programming it a certain way. To the average person, they're hearing a violin, but that it's just you on your keyboard. So
yeah.
that's one instance of it changing the game for composers in terms of doing demos and mock-ups and even what ends up in the final project itself. So this just seems like it's sort of the next level in the progression of where things are heading in a way. So it's like I can't I don't know. I don't think I know enough to pass judgment, but it's just a very interesting time to see what's happening and how
Yeah,
it's going
yeah,
to
yeah,
change filmmaking in general. Yeah.
yeah. Actually,
Good.
it's kind of challenge accepted.
Yeah. There you
Let's
go.
see what you're gonna do and what we like. If it's kind of inspiration as well, in a way that if that thing is growing, even we need to grow.
Yes. And we have to be
Yeah,
better.
yeah. We need to
Yeah.
grow. We need to be better than that, so that it can't replace us in any
That's a
way.
great point. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I think
yeah,
it makes us all work harder for sure.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
true.
Very
I like that.
nicely put, Sai, actually. Good that you brought it up about AI too. Yeah. One more problem is it's very repetitive, which you
All
it's
right.
very repetitive because I think it has
Yeah,
only
that's
like
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Mm.
kind of the same music. It always gives the same kind of, like, tune would be a little bit similar when you go into the music, but
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
well,
Yeah.
kind of
I mean,
like,
it's obviously it's training and it's getting better as well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess yeah, we'll see where it heads, but yeah, I mean, I think it's still a great tool for a filmmaker
Mm-hmm.
who needs it, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
cool. Nice. Also, I think we are at time.
Mm.
It was actually
Very nice
like
talking to
very
you.
nice talking to you. Very
Thank you.
humbling. We learned a lot about the industry and also about how this industry works, and we still expect a lot to see from you. Like I expect to see a lot of great movies and shows coming from you.
Thank
And
you.
we hope we collaborate with you someday.
That'd be great.
We
Yeah,
get
yeah,
some
should.
chance actually.
Yeah, let's absolutely stay in contact. I want to see what
Yeah,
both of you
yeah.
are doing, and when you have your film off the ground, I want to take a look. And
Yeah, sure, sure. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yep,
it's been great. Thank you both.
we'll shoot you, and I'll shoot you the link I was talking about.
Yes.
Let's see where it came from.
I need to look into that. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Also, for folks who are watching this episode, thank you for watching it, and we're signing off for now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you both.
If you like our content, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you all. Bye.